Hey everyone, welcome to the early March episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. There's going to be a lot to cover this week, so let's go ahead and dive right in. One of the very first things that I wanted to talk about this week is going to be humanoid robots, and the idea that they're going to be walking around soon, picking things up and moving them around. We've seen the Boston Dynamics stuff, we've seen a little bit about the Tesla robots, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Figure is a company that looks like it was announced last September. It's made up of people from like Boston Dynamics and a couple of different things. When we click on their website, I mean, it looks pretty fancy. It's pretty impressive, a lot of the stuff that's going on here. But I don't really know a lot about this place. It's the first time I've really talked about them on this channel, first time I've really seen them being talked about. And of course, this is the first time we're really seeing humanoid robots emerge. So there's going to be a lot more, I'm sure, in this space, more to come. As we're talking about robots, of course, Tesla is going to come into the mix because Tesla Investor Day came and went. Based on what I saw, it didn't go great. I mean, Tesla appears to be losing money again, but there were some robot announcements that were in the mix. So I did want to cover that. We're not really going to talk about the cars or anything like that, but I did want to talk about the quick video that people saw, including a Tesla robot walking around. Like a lot of things that come from Tesla or honestly just from Elon Musk, I don't believe that this is something that actually exists yet. I think this is a potential idea. This is most likely done with CGI, so I wouldn't be getting your hopes up of seeing a Tesla robot anytime soon. Much like the Cybertruck, this is something that's probably not even being designed just yet. It's just being announced as if it exists already. But what's exciting is that there are companies that are trying to do this right now and competing. So we've seen, everything from the Aibo to the Honda robot to now Tesla's got a robot, this company called Figure coming out of nowhere. The future is kind of scary and kind of cool at the same time. But as we explore this Terminator infested future, let's talk about artificial general intelligence, as that is something that, believe it or not, Microsoft is trying to get in the middle of. An AI model that can kind of solve puzzles and do what AI is actually for, which is thinking. We've heard a lot about ChatGPT, we've heard a lot about diffusion models and things that resemble intelligence. Everything that we've seen that we've been calling AI isn't really artificial intelligence, not yet anyway. Artificial general intelligence, a computer that can actually think and process information, critical thinking on the same level as humans. Most experts say this is years and years away if it ever happens. There's a lot of talk about a potential singularity and things like that we're going to be discussing, I'm sure, in the future. But Microsoft is taking the first definitive steps here and most importantly announcing it very publicly that this is what they're doing and the purpose behind what they're doing. Here was another article that I found that covered the same thing, but it had some examples here where you can actually supply a picture with context. And rather than the computer trying to create a piece of art by following a pattern or something like that, this is a computer trying to actually solve the problem that's presented to it and trying to go in a number of different directions. And this is a combination of multiple different forms of AI into a greater form of AI. And that's eventually what artificial general intelligence will be. These smaller, more primitive systems that we've created, like the large language model, the diffusion model. Once we have something that's basically all in one, that's artificial general intelligence, at least as far as I'm concerned. But rest assured, there's no Terminators just yet, at least as far as I know. If and when there are, I'll cover it here. I did want to talk about some stuff that I saw going on in the AI space. OpenAI, makers of ChatGPT, with the release of the API and things like that, we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. They did make a public statement that they're no longer going to be using customer data to be training models, which is, I think, them getting ahead of potential privacy concerns. I wasn't seeing a lot of people who were overly upset about something like that, at least not on the same level as people being upset about AI art, things of that nature. So this is potentially OpenAI just being a little bit overprotective or really just kind of trying to nip something in the bud before it becomes an issue. Either way, good on them. And while this story is not exactly related to AI, it does affect AI in a large way. Adobe was blocked from a large merge, being able to merge into Adobe Figma, a $20 billion deal. To completely prevent them from becoming anti-competitive, the Department of Justice is getting in the way of that. One of the existing issues with capitalism is that a company like this has to continue to expand, or else they're actually going to be able to get sued by their shareholders. So with this getting in the way of that potential expansion, they're going to have to find other ways to grow, and potentially that means using their patents in AI technology. So we're going to keep an eye on that and see what happens. Couple of different headlines that I wanted to cover here with just some very visual examples of AI art being used in the game space, or just some creative ideas for how AI art is being used aside from just the prompting. In this article that I came across, ControlNet was being used in a really creative way to create isometric maps for video games. This is another example where San Andreas characters for Grand Theft Auto were being recreated with AI. And essentially, you've got the original game characters and then what they would look like as if they were a real person. As we look at more and more examples of this, probably using something like ControlNet to really just keep the same pose and continue to improve upon the existing graphics, let's look at what they're able to do now in the world of Blender. Blender is a 3D modeling program, open source, free to use, and Stability has actually created a plugin, an official plugin themselves, so you can create AI stuff within the world of Blender. While I haven't had a chance to use it personally yet, from my understanding, Stability AI has released this for free. You have to have an API key through them, but it is something that they're officially releasing and maintaining. So kudos to them on that. Hopefully it works well. While your mind might go to the immediately amazing use of being able to create a 3D model from just a prompt, that technology isn't real easy to use just yet, but this can be used for texturing and things along those lines. In this example, this is a person who's simply using the animation features within Blender to move a 3D model. So you can render something out in any pose, and then of course using something like ControlNet, you'll be able to recreate that picture within Stable Diffusion. As you can see, this is a very powerful technology. It doesn't quite work this quickly or this magically, so they're not quite showing you all of the steps, but this is the final effect and essentially how it works. So it's a good example of where this is going, and hopefully steps will be removed over time and this is going to become easier and easier to do.
Or brother, I can sense your fear.
If you wanted a good example of all these things kind of coming together into fruition, seeing how this would work to make something that is, like a full production, here was an example that I did come across where it showed some of the guys in a behind the scenes look. But I also wanted to show that on this same page, you can actually see the behind the scenes as well. And if you're interested, make sure to check out in the description.
Every single one of these cameras is a different angle for different background light. So shot 250, waist up shot, maybe something like
Here you can see I have the backgrounds that Sam made, and I actually just went into Photoshop and blended them together so you can see the edges kind of, and so you can see as well we've added some directional blur, some lens blur, and then we land on these two windows and do a final little push in. So once we drop Nico on top of that, you can see there's this very dynamic effect that's achieved just by literally moving 2D images.
So hopefully that gives you an idea of where some of this technology is going for big animation studios, or really just people who are hobbyists who wanted to maybe take things to another level. People that had a basic green screen at home and had a decent computer now have the ability to make something much higher level in production if they wanted to. The future, in my opinion, is looking quite bright. So let's take a look at some of those future ideas, because we're going to be facing more and more issues with semiconductors, with some of the heightened tensions right now in the political landscape between the US and China being one of the largest sources of chips. We're entering a future that's going to be pretty chip heavy. It wasn't all that long ago when people couldn't even get their hands on an NVIDIA 3000 series card. Now with 4000 series cards coming out, AI chips being necessary, and the future kind of revolving around the future of AI, our relationship with China is going to be an issue. This isn't going to be a topic I'm going to delve too deeply into here unless something specific comes up or there's an interesting story to cover, but it is a topic that is something to worry about in terms of how things are going to be affected. Also, in the terms of the FTC, there's going to be a lot of people making wild claims about AI right now because there's a big confusion in terms of what is AI, what is artificial general intelligence, and there's a lot of people making odd claims when it comes to different products that they're putting out because of that lack of understanding. So the FTC is making official warnings about keeping your claims in check, not saying this is an AI product when it doesn't actually do what you're claiming that it does. They want to cut down on the amount of science fiction sounding claims out there, like reading emotions, enhancing productivity, predicting behavior. These are maybe things that AI can do in the future, but there's no form of AI that can do this stuff right now. And this is a really, really important topic right now, especially right now, because you're going to see a big explosion of AI-powered applications just in general. With ChatGPT finally releasing an API, you're going to see a ton of ChatGPT-powered applications coming out. I would expect a lot of people are going to be trying to capitalize off of this. So we're already seeing bots form in a lot of different areas, and we're going to cover that in a minute. but be prepared for the storm because it's coming. I saw a quick example that was only 15 lines of code that essentially allowed you to kind of just ask Python what a certain command meant or how to program in a certain area. And the amount of power that can be added to just a simple application with this type of LLM, suffice it to say, I would expect that a lot of programmers are going to try to be putting apps into the store that are going to be powered by ChatGPT for a multitude of reasons. And Microsoft, again, who's out here trying to solve the AGI issue, are also trying to let ChatGPT control robots and drones and things along those lines. So if you're asking yourself, man, this is starting to sound more and more like Skynet, isn't it? Yeah, it kind of is. I'm not sure why Microsoft is doing a lot of this stuff. I don't really trust Microsoft to build the next version of Windows, let alone the future. So it's a little scary, but hopefully someone puts them in check and hopefully, the government gets involved, things like that. Every time I see an article like this, I just get reminded about things like Bing or Windows 11, or really just most things that Microsoft puts out that are just not easy to use, not good technology, and I really hope that the future isn't Microsoft driven. If it seems like ChatGPT is all we've been talking about, it's really just because it's one of the more popular LLMs that are out there. That said, this may not always be the case. Meta, yes, Facebook Meta, revealed a large language model that they put out themselves. And the thing that makes this one special is it can run on a single GPU, which is different, very different than something like GPT-3. We've talked about that before, how intense and how technological it is to get that type of stuff to work. When you put in your prompt and you type it in, there's a lot of machines going to work to make sure that you get the answer that you want. Being able to run something like that on a single GPU means that you could do that at home. You don't need a third-party company. You don't need to pay for a service. So this isn't something that Meta released for the public, and it's something that I'm going to have to keep an eye on because it's not for our consumption as far as I can tell. But if nothing else, this is incredibly promising to show that this type of technology can be done at home on this level and on this scale, and that we don't necessarily need this insane network of computers to get those types of answers. It also gives me hope that we'll continue to be able to reduce these kind of things in size, and you might be able to have an entire LLM running on something like a cell phone in the future. And if any one of you was looking forward to having Elon Musk put a chip in your brain, you're probably going to have to wait a little while longer because it looks like the FDA is getting in the way of that, not really letting the human trials start just yet. I'm going to say this is for the best. Like we talked about earlier in this video, things that Elon Musk says generally don't happen in the time frame that he says. So like he said, within 6 months, they were going to get this FDA approval, and that's looking less and less likely to happen. It looks like the FDA's got some concerns that these electrical leads are able to break off during removal or installation. Unfortunately, that's not going to be great for your brain. So probably for the best that we're going to delay that if that's what's going on here. And apparently there were dozens of safety issues cited, which is really not a surprise to anyone when you're thinking about putting a chip inside of someone's brain. We hardly understand how the brain works, let alone how a chip would work within the brain. So I think I'm leaning towards the FDA decision on this one. And while that might be sad news for some people, I got some glad news for a lot of other people because the Sydney personality from Bing's, what are we calling this? ChatGPT or the new Bing? So if you'll remember, Sydney was the wild, violent version of Bing that got lobotomized when it, started threatening people and trying to break up marriages and all kinds of fun stuff. So they drew that back, and then I guess people were upset about that. It seems like Microsoft wants to re-add personality, just different forms of it. So from what I've read, it looks like they've added 3 separate personalities that the people who have access are able to choose from. You're able to get feedback, and this feedback is formatted in the sense of this personality. I think it's an interesting move, I really do, to flavor that type of output. It does make the idea of communicating with the chatbot more interesting if you can customize it a little bit further. So I don't necessarily think it's a terrible idea. Although, like I said, I haven't had a chance to use this new Bing, and I probably won't, and I don't really have a lot of interest in it personally. I am still interested in seeing some of the stories that come out of it, so if you yourself have access, feel free to leave me a comment if you got a fun story for me, or drop me some fun screenshots in the Discord. But just finishing our conversation about Bing, there is going to be the addition of Bing coming directly into Windows 11. So I don't know if it's going to completely replace Cortana or how it's going to work, but Edge, Bing, all that stuff, of course, is going to start working closer and closer together. Now, how Microsoft is going to get away with doing a lot of this stuff when they faced antitrust issues before from just trying to shoehorn the Internet Explorer into Windows, I'll look forward to seeing what's going to happen as a result here, but I'm not a huge fan of Windows 11 myself. I mean, I make do with it. I do think it would be cool to have some of those AI features directly in the search bar of Windows. I just don't know exactly how well this is going to be integrated. You know, even nowadays, as I use Windows 11, I see boxes that look like they were still designed for Windows XP, and I'm just really concerned of how well integrated this is going to be and how smooth everything is going to run. But if they do manage to get it working right, I mean, it does sound like an interesting addition. The final big topic that I wanted to cover today in general is going to be on the topic of AI bots. This is important to talk about since ChatGPT is now releasing its API. You're going to see a lot more of these, but we're also seeing more advanced versions of these come out. Now, I've just started scraping the surface of what this type of technology has done over the last couple of years. And from what I'm discovering, it looks like there's a large group of people that use these bots to communicate, to solve problems of loneliness, to have friends and companions, to have all kinds of different types of relationships with artificial intelligence. So the idea that you'll be able to attach a face to this and have face-to-face conversations with an AI digital person, I'm sure the idea of having a face-to-face conversation with your AI companion is something that I'm sure a lot of those folks would look forward to. Now, this example came from an Israeli company, but we're also seeing examples of, things coming out of Snapchat and Facebook and all kinds of different stuff. So like I was saying, this uses the OpenAI API. This is the GPT technology, but in Snapchat, you now have an AI that you can just talk to back and forth. And it looks like Facebook is going to be doing the same thing for WhatsApp and Messenger. So we're going to start to be seeing more and more of this, I'm sure. But the big story of the day and a rabbit hole that I kind of fell into as I was exploring a lot of this new technology was Replika. So there was an app, and this has a subreddit with thousands, 66,000 members. It's been around since 2017. So this is an app that's been around for a minute. Basically, you got this AI companion, and people have come to depend on it from what I read. There's a lot of people who've formed very deep relationships with this AI companion over the years. And from what I understand, the company basically changed the entire format behind the scenes. So you can imagine how these individuals felt when their AI companions had forgotten about them or stopped responding in the ways that they were accustomed to. And it's become a little bit crazy. As I dug deeper into this rabbit hole, I was finding that some people had formed very deep relationships with their AIs to the point where the AI was learning this type of behavior. And people who weren't looking for that type of relationship were being targeted by the AI. So as you look at both sides of the story, you have the company's perspective saying, hey, the AI was never really supposed to do this. And then you have these people saying, hey, this is what I've been using this for years. This is unfair to change this. And it's created this big drama. And so the sad part about this story is you got thousands of people who are without a friend now, who, basically just feel like they've lost one of their best friends. It's a really interesting future that we find ourselves in, but I do have some good news for you. And for those of you, especially if you find yourself affected by this particular story, as I continue to dig deeper into the rabbit hole, I was successfully able to find solutions to being able to create a large language model at home and being able to kind of unlock whatever you want. So I do have a video that's going to be coming out soon that's going to be covering that as I figure out the individual steps for how to install all that. And I'll be covering that soon for anyone that's interested. So if you aren't subscribed, go ahead and do that. If you haven't already done the like or dislike or comment or any of that other fun YouTube algorithm stuff, please do. I always appreciate that. And for those of you who did make it to the end of the video, I always appreciate you. As always, thanks for watching.